Thank you for downloading this podcast. You're about to explore temporal ideas with world-leading experts in considering the question, can organisational time cultures be good for us? In this wide-ranging exploration of how time consciousness is constructed in organisations, my guests explore the individual, collective and cultural implications. We discuss areas such as quarterly financial reporting, flexible working, past positive time perspective, the 24/7 tech culture, sabbaticals, self-organising, purpose, meaning, and the time-saving fallacy, to name just a few. The late Robert Levine tells us that all cultures keep time differently. It's our organisational cultural pace that dictates whether we can enjoy good work. Famous for her pioneering work on burnout, social psychologist Christina Maslach discusses the 6 factors of mental health and emotional well-being that must become the norm for good organisations. Psychologist Maciej Stolowski leads the way in time perspective theory, research and practice. His insights into organisational time solutions point to understanding the importance of the path of time, past, present, future. Please like, comment and share this lively podcast in coming to your own conclusions as to whether organisational time cultures can be good for us. A very warm welcome once again to the second special edition of the Time Talks at the Universite de Nantes with the 4th International Conference of Time Perspective. My name is Alan Beck, a psychology educator, balanced time consultant, just made a change from the last one there, and social entrepreneur. We are here with Dr. Robert Levine. It's fine. Is it okay? Would you like to tell me the real version?
At Ellis Island, they decided it was Levine.
Levine. It's quite sexy, isn't it? And Bob is a social psychologist, a professor of psychology at California State University. He is winner of many international awards for his research in teaching, writing, and research. Author of Geography of Time, and Stranger in the Mirror. That's just been re-edited, hasn't it? He explores physical, social, and economic, psychological well-being through different cultural beliefs about time and their impact of the quality of our lives. Sound like you? We also have Christina, Dr. Christina, here we go, Maslach?
No, not really.
No.
You're going for the Polish guttural, but we don't go there, actually.
Well, let's have the posh version.
Yeah, Maslach.
Maslach, so much better.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, she is a professor of psychology at the University of California, Berkeley, famous for her pioneering work on burnout and the Maslach burnout inventory, or what I prefer, BMI.
MBI.
And I prefer that as well.
MBI.
Yeah, what is going on with these people? And there's all sorts of awards there that have been awarded to you. Honorary Fellow of the American Association of the Advancement of Science, plus many, many more. And finally, we're going to struggle with this one as well. I've heard him called Magic, which I quite like, but I think the pronunciation is more like Maciej. Maciej? Maciej. That's close. Do the surname, go on.
Maciej, and Maciek is a form for friend.
Maciej. But let's get the surname from you.
Stolarski.
Stolarski. Professor of Psychology at the University of Warsaw. He's a prolific researcher and collaborator of many areas of social psychology and well-being. In particular, he's leading the way in the psychology of time perspective research and practice. Did you know that? Leading the world map of time perspective, he also has a remarkable hobby, which is noteworthy, which involves having children every 2 years before and after the International Conference of Time Perspective. That's very interesting. Anyway, together with our...
This is number 3.
It's the first time.
Yeah. Together with our highly knowledgeable and experienced audience here, we will attempt to explore the temporal ideas, realities, and impact of employee well-being in organisations. For our viewers, Christina, can you start us off then with your first thoughts on our question, which is, can organisational time cultures be good for us?
I would assume they can, because I assume all kinds of cultures can be good. But I think the question that we're dealing with now is beginning to see some organizational cultures that are not so good and are causing real problems. And what we're seeing a lot of at this point is a push toward making people work more and faster.
Yeah.
And accomplish more within that same time. So you're facing a kind of people talk about time starvation or time thieves or time, that somehow there's
poverty.
Yeah. And so I think it's an interesting way of thinking about it. People have looked at it in other kinds of ways, and there are other kind of consequences of a lot of this. Often, what I hear now is when people say burnout, they're thinking of just the exhaustion part of it, which is too much work, not enough resources, not enough sleep, all of this kind of thing in trying to keep up with what's an impossible, set of goals.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's just hold that then and see what Magic thinks about the question.
So the organizational cultures, can they be good?
Yeah.
For us, definitely. Everything depends on the characteristics of particular culture.
Yes.
And from the temporal perspective, the perspective on time perspectives, I believe that time perspective is not only the individual phenomenon, but sometimes even more important, maybe the aspect of collective time perspectives. And still, this area misses research, empirical research, but I do believe that organizations, groups, countries, societies do have their collective time perspectives, and their time perspectives have huge impact on the quality of life of the members of particular society. Perhaps this impact is similar or even more pronounced than the one that we observe at the individual level. Again, my thoughts go to the idea of balanced time perspective here, because as on the individual level, when the balanced time perspective predicts up to 40 or more percent of variance in well-being, also at the collective level, I do believe that collective time perspectives or organizational time perspectives in this particular case can be crucial for determining workers and leaders' work satisfaction, work engagement, well-being, low levels of burnout, but this is still to be studied.
Okay, great. Two very coherent, clear answers so far, and I'm sure you will add to this.
I would.
No pressure.
So no disagreements. Completely endorse every word that's been said so far. So a couple of things that I would add to it is the difference between the overall philosophy of a culture or the overall culture of the organization and the flexibility within that. As far as the overall goes, I think it's become so common, at least in the United States and in most large corporations worldwide, to have quarterly reports. And that arbitrary number that came out of nowhere, I believe has enormous consequences for the sorts of pressures that need to be put on individuals. Uh, what that said, I think the biggest problems occur when there's no flexibility within those quarters or overlapping the quarters. So there may be some people in an organization that are in positions where it makes sense to look at them the same way week by week. There are some people, say you're in the accounting department. There are going to be, time is going to be condensed in the United States. It's somewhere in March and early April. You certainly want to keep these folks on. People need to be responsible toward a very tight clock time. But what happens when that's over? Mm-hmm. Is there an advantage? Is it just a little Sabbath? Or is it another sort of cadence that should be led, that people should be led through? And, if you're going to maximize, one of the ironies and one of the paradoxes of it is that it seems to be pretty typical that if you can maximize the quality of life of the individuals, it maximizes the quality of, not the quality of life, but the quality of whatever production of the organization. And even if you don't like each other, even if you're just selfish about it, there's personal advantage to keeping other people satisfied with their cadence. There are some people in the organization, on the other hand, that I think need to be handled very differently. And as academics, we know all about it. I mean, 2 out of 3 people who we were sitting with here are folks that are essentially retired, legally, financially retired, who are continuing to work with passion for the sort of work that they're doing, and I think one of the reasons that is that we've been allowed to have sabbaticals in between, whatever form that sort of thing may take. We've been allowed to just stop what we're doing, pause, try something else. And if you have somebody in a more creative department, in research departments, I think it's really detrimental to the organization to keep them on a 3-month production schedule.
Yeah.
And I'll stop there.
Okay. So what I've understood from this then is that there's how an organization would look at the individuals within it, and then how the way that businesses work is there's a financial system in process there, for a capitalist organisation making money. So monthly reports in terms of progress, efficiency, and these measures impact on the individual employees' well-being and their ability to function well. Is that reasonable? Mm-hmm. Okay, so do any of you know of an organisation that is running a culture that really would have attributes like flexibility, adaptability for its employees? So maybe self-organising structures for its employees, where they take responsibility for their own work, as you said, as you do as academics or former academics, where your passion drives, if you like, your productivity and efficiency.
But the challenge, though, in thinking about that for any kind of activity is the extent to which you are operating as a solo person.
Yeah.
And the extent to which you are operating linked to others on a team, or you do some things and it impacts other people, and so you have to be cognizant of all of that. And so when I hear different things that are sometimes being proposed, I then am not surprised later on when they don't work.
Right.
Because they haven't thought through. You know, it's kind of like, I forget the name of the employer who said this, but it said, you know what, anybody can take a vacation whenever they want. Anytime, matter of days, you just go do it. You want to know how many people did that? 0.
Yeah.
And it was because, oh my God, I might lose my job. I can't leave just, without telling somebody else because, we actually work together on this and they're dependent on, da 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 da. And if I leave, how do I know, just whenever I want, how do I know I'm coming back to a job?
Yeah.
So there's this thing that I think too often when people start thinking about individuals, they sort of focus it as one and forget the context.
Exactly.
And the social environment that is all part and parcel of this. So that, working out any kind of thing where people are taking more action, perhaps to be more flexible or to, do more work now and less later, has to be done in this larger context in order to actually work.
Yeah.
And if it gets too focused on you can do whatever you want all by yourself, I think it misses by a mile what's actually happening in the organizations. That said, I think that having opportunities for people, like the sabbatical, which I always thought was a wonderful idea, but to make that more available through many more workplaces so that people have an opportunity. And you say, here's what I want to do, and then you work out when it would happen, and who covers for you, and and all of that kind of thing. Having those kind of opportunities available for the kinds of things that Bob was talking about, I think make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've really hit the
right. That's what I'm looking
right
for.
point.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So you haven't really seen anything. You've certainly seen things start and people try things,
Yeah.
but it hasn't succeeded. Is anybody actually aware of an organisation that has a time culture that's actually focused on the people rather than the abstract product and the economic structure around it? No.
Wait, yeah.
Does somebody have it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know several.
Great. Good.
Give us an
Alright.
example.
There's a famous example of Semler from Brazil who founded a company, Semco,
Subco, yeah.
which is completely based on self-organization.
Right.
And there's also a Dutch company involved in healthcare where
Yes.
the teams organize themselves rather than having the director decide.
And the name of that is?
Thuiszorg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So there's two examples.
And how old are those companies?
I think Semler started with that in the 90s or
Great.
maybe a bit later.
Yeah.
And the Dutch company is about 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
And it continues to function. This is good news because it
Can I make a comment, and I think it pertains, but
Of course, no, you can.
You stop me if I'm going off the rails here. But when Chris is talking about the idea of people being offered time and not taking
Yeah.
time for that reason. So I had the opportunity to spend a sabbatical in Japan several years ago, and one of the things that one finds is that in Japan, unlike my home country, there's a significant mandated number of vacation days.
Yeah.
In the United States, there are no federally mandated vacation days. 0. The only economically a successful country in the world that doesn't have that. In Japan, there are a number, but what was found was that very few people took vacation days.
Right.
And people recognized that was taking a toll on people. And when they asked them why they're not taking vacation days, it was because they felt like that was being unpatriotic to people, essentially. And when the company said, why don't you go take vacation days, that was taken as a very bad message. The message was that we can do fine without
Not
you.
you.
And so the government actually put together an advertising campaign that was trying to encourage Japanese people that it's their patriotic duty to take vacation day, and explaining how the economy depended. But it's a little twisted though.
Okay, good.
It's not. It's not perfectly socially correct. It was because financially, Japan depended on you going out and spending money. And
yes.
But the good news is that vacation days increased.
Right.
That people taking their vacations.
It had some effect. Maybe it takes generations before it could be taken up more fully. All right. So, but it sounds like there's some kind of invisible pressure, cultural pressures for people to. If you give them an opportunity, they are hesitant to take it. So maybe an example where it happens naturally is where a woman has a child and takes time off work for that reason. And in the UK, legally, their job is held for them while they take the maternity leave, and then they have paternity leave as well. So they have a period of time off, and then they are expected to come back. And I'm not sure of the exact numbers, so I'm afraid I can't quote them. But a percentage, more than half, tend to not go back to work. They take many years off. But then they try to come back into the job. They don't get a job, or they're not offered a job because they've been out of work for 6 years. So there's somehow some kind of system or a cultural pressure there that says if you step out of the work culture, then you're out, and it's very difficult to get back in again. And this is why maybe somebody wouldn't take a holiday when offered one, and they would rather burn out. No, they don't think that, do they?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
Can one ask
Yeah,
a
of
question?
course.
You know, the period of gestation is so important,
Yes.
and women are not given time off then. In Romania, I believe they are allowed to have time off then. And I think that's a great step forward, because the stress of a mother in a heavy job will affect the fetus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that largely just a lack of recognition of realities to say that, well, I'll give you leave, and a leave of a certain time. If you come back in a certain time, you get your job back. But if you don't come back, if you come back in that later time, you don't get your job back. And the fact of the matter is that it's not recognizing that, it would be, it's not recognizing the fact that many people require this longer period of time. I mean, that's just a lack of fairness.
Humanity, yes, treating people as unique individuals and seeing them as such with their own particular circumstances that would affect their ability to return at a certain time.
I find it very dangerous when we only look at companies from the academic point of view, and we try to demonize them as if they were the bad organizations
We're not trying to do that.
who want to exploit the poor people, mothers, fathers, and everyone. Actually, if you discuss these things with HR managers, they really struggle hard finding solutions for that, and they try increasingly more and more, because of the lack of people at the labor market, to find some solutions. Some women want to stay at home longer, some want to come back earlier.
Yeah.
But if they want to come back in 5 months, whom do you find instead? Who will fill in the gap? And the companies are there to function. They are not here to be a social association that waits for people to, they have certain purposes.
They're a business.
So it's a mutual relationship where we try to find our ways so that the companies can function and people can have decent lives. Yeah, and it's about mutual negotiation. It's also about the responsibility on the side of the employee, because the employees also contribute to the culture, how they treat the company. If they only want to sort of have a decent job, do their job, go away, it's a mutual relationship. That's what I wanted to.
A mutual relationship or a mutual contract?
Yeah, to do with a legal contract that has something to do with human relationship. If you don't feel appreciated, you leave the company. So it is sort of a relationship.
Go on.
I'm not sure that always works, because in countries where there's an excess of labourers, companies can pick and choose, and they're not very faithful often to their workers. So where's the relationship then?
Yes, yes, I go with you. I mean, I've been working in, meant to be some kind of consultant advisor to organisations, complex organisations, global ones and small ones. And what I see is, after 25 years of perfection, is that the company presents itself, and it's a closed system. So I mean, you apply for the job, but the job has there's an application process there, and they dictate what the job is, and then they look for that person. They fit the job to. So you're already starting to buy in. This is what HR do. This is starting to buy into something, which is a legal contract, and having sat on panels that decide who's going to be the next chairman or the next executive on the board, you may have 3 applicants that are good on paper. You have to decide which one will fit. My experience is that they always pick the one who's going to toe the line, who's going to be the most malleable to a culture which actually is tacitly arranged. It's not, you know, when you walk into when I ask companies what is their organisational time culture, they look around the board waiting for somebody else to answer that question. They don't really know. It's almost like they've never heard of the
I don't think they think about it in those ways.
They don't think about it
as a time culture.
They don't think about it as a time culture.
Unless there's a clock time, you know, that you have to come in at a certain hour. You have to stay so many hours.
They do think about it as clocking in and clocking out, and
yeah.
that's a legal contract thing again.
It's the same as in the case of time perspective in the individual level. It's often unconscious. It's in the definition.
Yeah.
I feel some part of it.
Exactly.
So it's the same in the case of organizations. Often,
Yeah.
mostly unconscious.
The other thing I would say, and this is not just organizations per se, but I think it happens in a number of areas of society, we always need to sort of look at the question of what is considered the norm or the baseline.
Yes.
And what happens in a lot of organizations is that, and people coming in to work in those, is that work is fixed, it's set up, and everybody has to adapt to it. So all of the things that are developed, like maternity leave, are as a special exception to the norm, the rule. Okay, they were not designed for people who have families, let's say. You know, in which case the workplace might be designed in a different way, you know, in some sense. So there's always that implicit sort of norm that people are adjusting to and fitting in or not. And so all of these things, like what are the solutions when it doesn't quite fit or there's some other kind of thing. But it's because there is, and maybe as you're saying, non-conscious way, you know,
yes.
we're taking that for granted, that organizations are, and people fit and adapt to those structures,
yes,
as opposed to some other way in which we organized our work.
And to some degree, education, I mean early education from 3 to 16 or whatever, the very foundational stuff, is preparation for that. I mean, when you go to school, you don't go, wow, I'm really into gymnastics, I'd like to do that 3 days a week, and then I'll do a bit of art on a Friday. And then can you tell me everything that you know about Plato on Thursday? It's just not what happens. I mean, they in a secondary school setting, they learn For the first hour, they'll do some French, and then they'll do double maths, and then they'll go to the gym, play football. Then they'll come back and do geography and some science. So they're learning not to think for themselves, not to have views and opinions, because you have to be quiet when you're learning. And they're learning how to fit into an implicit organisation, really. They're being schooled to fit in. What do you think to that idea?
I think it's an overgeneralization.
Thank you. Yes, good.
I would say that there are. I represent the individual differences department, and that I would say that there are different companies, and there are different organizational cultures. And for instance, at universities, it's completely different than in business.
Yeah.
And also within business, different organizations have completely different cultures, different styles, different at many levels. I mean, we have many dimensions of organizational culture. And yes, there are those differences, and the approach to the employees, to the way of thinking about issues like maternity or giving birth to a child is different in different organizations. And I personally work at academia, so it's different, but I have many friends working in business, and their experiences are completely various. They differ between each other and in very many aspects. And for instance, I have a friend working in one of the big companies in the pharmacy area of business and pharmacy sector, and I was impressed by the policy of this organization, who supported maternity, who encouraged their female workers to give birth to a child, who supported fathers with the opportunities to have a home office to take care of a ill child, or even to support their wife who recently gave birth to a child. And this is very common in this particular organization.
Yeah.
Of course, there are some others which remind rat race much more.
Excuse me, can you be specific? What organization does it?
This positive aspects, it was Eli Lilly. It's one of the big firms.
Pharma?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they're economically wealthy, aren't they? So they're in a position to play a little bit more with the culture.
Definitely.
So an organization that was mentioned, I believe it was this morning, is in Silicon Valley. There are several, but Google, I think, is the clearest organization. We have a friend who rose to a pretty good position there, and he showed me his life there, and he's paid very well. He had a luxury bus that took him back and forth to where he lived, because unfortunately couldn't afford to live on a very high salary near Google. You get there, you have a lot of time to yourself. There are a lot of special spaces that are set up, little cafes, self-serving cafes, with the notion that creative people need to be given their time. Everything is taken care of. There's a laundry chute there. There's a barber there that you can have. Child care if you need it. The idea of taking care of everything, and it was an attempt. It was a very American sort of attempt, I think, to put together a culture that would be doing all the right things. Now, to look at what's happened to it, there are some people who love being part of that culture. Other people, like our friend, who just feel suffocated after a while. It's just you've just been sucked into this organization that I can't get out of. There's no way. I'm getting paid too much to leave. It's like, it starts to sound a little bit like people who go to prison, and when they get out of prison, one of the problems they have is being able to make their own lives. And I just present that as a very complicated anecdote.
Yeah. It's almost like that organisation is parenting these individuals, and, and they can't cope outside of it.
I would argue it's different. This is
Good.
where 24/7 originated, that concept.
Yeah.
And the idea, basically, I think, is for a lot of these things, and people say, oh, how wonderful, you get all the food you want, and you get all this kind of stuff, and da-da-da-da, so you do not go home. You work more and more hours, and you're expected to.
Yeah.
And so this is, we'll take care of everything. We'll get a concierge, take care of it, we'll have your birthday party for you, you gotta keep working. And this notion that people were talking about, like it's embarrassing to go home at a reasonable hour because everybody is still working and everybody else is still there and you're not, and whatever. So I think it's an insidious thing that has led to this sort of norm, what we're seeing in a lot of tech companies, but in a lot of other organizations as well, which is you could do more.
Yeah.
We're going to demand more, you can meet it, you can be there.
Yeah.
We'll do this other stuff to help you, but you're here.
Yeah. You just remind me of something. I was giving a talk in San Jose, and I was talking about my pace of life data, where in this case I had ranked 36 cities across the United States, average pace of life, and I look at people during main work hours, what most of us consider main work hours. And look at walking speed, work speed, talking speed, and all. And San Jose came out fairly low on the list. And there was a guy out there that I could tell. He was livid. He was just livid. He says, "You don't know what you're talking about." He said, "You're looking at me. You're looking at me from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. You don't understand that I am always at work, even when I'm sleeping. There's something that's going on in Tokyo." That's going to have a profound effect. That's having a profound effect on my life, and that has consequences.
So there are other aspects about time
Yeah.
that I think need to be sort of thought of here, as well.
Great.
And there are just a variety of ways of thinking about it, but there's a reason for that.
And technology has taken us to that, hasn't it? In fact, McDonald's, I think, are looking at not having any staff at the front counter and just having, they're not very interesting robots, but that you select your very limited menu from this restaurant, and you put your card in, and then you wait for the number to come up, and your food is handed. So it's more that. So they're getting rid of the people at the front, the customer service.
They used to do that in New York City.
Horn and
Hardar back 70, 80 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? 100 maybe? I don't know.
And not too far in
Not too far from that.
Not too far in the future, we will have, robots because they fit the business culture much better. They're reliable. They don't get ill. They don't want babies. They don't even want to talk to you. They don't care how you are, and they don't get upset. They just keep producing at a much higher rate than a human being can produce. I think this is perhaps maybe something behind this 24-hour belief system, is that we've, as far as I'm aware, time management really kicked in the very early days of mass production.
Yeah.
And we started analysing and started getting HR people in to look at this and psychologists to look at this. How can we get people to be more productive and more effective? But that has led us to, humans are rubbish, let's get robots. Wherever we can. And we'll have to accept humans until we've found another way to replace them. And it's almost like new technology is allowed, the new emerging technologies are allowing us to, well, what does that do? It gives us all leisure time. I'm sure in the 80s there was lots of conferences, I didn't attend, sorry, not the 80s, the 70s, lots of conferences around this notion that in the future humans will have leisure time because robots and processes will be so vastly different. So we will have, we'll volunteer in society, we'll do stuff that's intrinsically interesting to us and motivating.
But the
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, but the fallacy in all of that, because that's been going on for a long time, and all these labor-saving devices, you
Yeah.
know, that you buy and you take home. And people keep saying, but how come I'm more busy than ever, and I'm not, you know, I don't have all this free time? And the fallacy was that if you don't have to do that, then it speeds up the tempo of life.
Right.
If it doesn't take a couple of days to write a letter, put it in the post office, and it gets to the person, or something like that, then, you know, my gosh, you can speed that up so
Yeah.
that it happens instantly, you
Yeah.
know. 5 seconds, I email, I click, you're there, you know, this kind of thing. So the pace, the tempo, I'm not sure the right words to put in that,
very good.
but a lot of those things, it's the notion that it's saving something, which you can then use to do something else, I think has very rarely come through in that way. If we save time, which is waste, then
Yeah.
we can get more done, you know, or
Yeah.
there's more pressure, or there's like, you could do it faster. You know, if you don't have to write with a quill pen, you can get that done more quickly.
Yeah.
Not that I have now extra time that is free to use for something else.
Or more quality.
Yeah, maybe also is that. But the idea that somehow all of this progress and a lot of things will save us time that we can use for leisure, I've been hearing that for decades and decades and decades.
And the quality of life doesn't
And
necessarily
it
rise
doesn't
with that.
say, yeah, wow, where did all those extra days and weeks and, you know, kind of thing. What I think happens is that it just gets faster,
Yeah.
and it gets you more connected, and it makes it more difficult to unplug in
Yeah.
some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be, again, showing my age, but when I would go on a sabbatical leave and go and live in another country while I'm doing my work, the phone never rang because it was a very expensive long-distance phone call, and if anybody called, it would have to be really fast because, you know, need to talk about getting my dissertation done, and what happened, you know, so there was just a very, you could be...
The pace was different.
Yeah, the pace was different.
Yeah.
And so I've not heard of any real vision yet. Maybe there's people out there who said, yes, the more that people don't have to work because of labor saving, because of robots, because of whatever, what are people going to be doing then? And how do we think about what our lives might turn out to be? And so there's a sense of leisure time and work time, which is kind of a carving out of 24 hours a week, a month, or something like that. And I think it's been more descriptive rather than something that really is like, this is an important thing and we need to protect it and put in things so that people really have their time off or they do something else or whatever.
I have a question, Dr. Maslach.
Yeah.
What is the relationship between meaning, purpose, and burnout, or lack of meaning and purpose and burnout? Because as the companies deal with burnout, they thought it was the lack of sleep and lack of relaxation.
Yeah.
And suddenly there are more and more corporate companies where people don't work hard.
Yeah.
They pretend to work, and
Yeah.
they actually don't produce much value,
Yeah.
but they are still burning out. And if you
Yeah.
ask them, what's the problem? You have all these relaxation rooms, you get massage, you get fresh food, but you're still burning out.
Yeah.
You see there is total lack of meaning.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. No, there's a couple of things there. One is that, first of all of those kinds of things you're talking about as prepared as solutions to burnout never were coming out of any research on burnout. They were coming out of research on stress, coping, you know, health, and it's kind of like, oh gosh, if things aren't going well, relax, get more sleep. Of course, we know we have you working until midnight, but you know, you should get more sleep. All of that kind of thing. And it's not that those are necessarily bad things, I'm not arguing against them, but to think that they are the solution to the problem are actually not. What they're doing is helping you to be stronger, more resilient, cope with more of that stressful stuff. Okay, so the fact that they're doing it doesn't mean that it should have worked for burnout.
Yeah.
What the research has been showing, though, is that there are some, so far at least 6 areas in which the fit between the job and the person is really critical. And some of those are the ones everybody thinks of. They always think of the first one, which is work demands. You know, too much, the imbalances, you know, too much work, not enough resources. Amount of control you have over your work. The recognition, which you mentioned earlier, which is a huge one, that you get positive feedback when you've done something well. One that we're seeing more and more of these days is the work community, the relationships you have with your colleagues, people you supervise, your boss, customers, whoever it is, patients, and the toxic work environment in terms of those social relationships is a big predictor of burnout. Fairness, in terms of whatever the policies are and how we run things and do things, is it fair? Fairly applied, or are there glass ceilings or discrimination or whatever? And then the sixth one is what I've been calling values, but meaning is what we're talking about. And that is that what I am doing is something that either doesn't get in the way of what I value, you know, I'm doing this, but you know, my thing is over here. But ideally, for a lot of people, there's something about what I do that is so important, meaningful, I'm proud of it. You know, it gives me great joy to be doing this. And sometimes this will take people through a lot of other bad stuff going on. At least I'm working with the kids in the school on this, and this is the thing. So if you strip work of meaning of that kind, you're actually setting people up for not liking their work, getting engaged in their work. If it is, you know, you're just getting it done, and it's not something that you can look at and sort of say, wow, I feel pretty good about that. And so we'll see people sometimes who are in work situations where some of those other five might not be so good, but if the meaning, the values are really powerful, it takes them through a lot of stuff. So it's those kinds of things that are what we're identifying more as what look like the kind of causal factors, that if you're going to make some solutions in the organization, you need to be thinking about what was causing the problem, as opposed to just saying, okay, buck up, we'll make you feel better and healthier, and then you'll be okay.
Yeah.
To do another 14-hour day.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Or to at least understand why you're in the difficulty you're in, because at least you can talk about it, you know, sensibly.
Yeah.
But you don't actually get out of the problem.
Yeah.
You're just able to talk about it better.
Well, one of the things, I mean, I'll just throw out here, I haven't thought of it in terms of time per se, but that toxic work environment, the thing that is really, I'm finding rather scary at this point, is more and more, I'm hearing from people, and we talk with them and interview them, that say it's a culture of fear. You don't dare say no. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, no, I can't come in this weekend and do that. I've got, you know, some other kind of thing. If you say no, your evaluation is going to go down. You might not keep the job. They're not going to write a strong letter. You're not going to get the promotion. Yeah. So you can't say no. Stay late, you can't say no. You also can't say, I am less than 150%.
Correct.
Like, I haven't figured out the solution quite. Can we talk a little bit? Because I'm kind of stuck here, and maybe, you know, Yeah. If I do that, I am displaying what people are thinking is weakness.
Yeah.
I haven't got it all solved. I haven't got the whole thing done. I can't even say, I'm really feeling frustrated. I'm feeling depressed. I'd like to talk to somebody, you know, just to kind of, you know, have I got the wrong idea? You don't do that, because again, there's this notion that if other people know that you've got this weakness, you're this humanity, but I mean, you know, you haven't figured it all out, they're going to not want to be with you, they're not going to want to help you, they're going to throw you under the bus if there's one coming by. And so what we're seeing in many more places than we used to see it is this culture of fear of not wanting to connect and reach out with other people.
Yeah.
So that, you know, and not wanting to do it for myself, and perhaps not being good when somebody else does it for me. So the notion that I have your back, you have mine, is, sort of crumbling there. And what we're seeing this, and we've seen it for a long time in healthcare, for example. We're seeing it now in spades in tech industries. We're seeing rises in suicide. We're seeing rises, all kinds of other things. And you're thinking, what kind of a social environment are we creating that the people who probably could understand you best because you're doing the same work, you're working with them, whatever, are not viewed as your colleagues, but more as potential enemies, as threats, and you have to hide from them, anything that is less than, perfection. So it's something. I mean, I haven't thought about it in terms of time, but in terms of the social, because some of these, your colleagues who are in the same work area as you, who you work with, probably know you, know the job, know what we're going through, can figure out solutions. It ought to be something that is really much more supportive. But increasingly we're hearing that the culture is such that social fabric is getting ripped apart.
Yeah.
So, what is your time perspective?
Well, I mean, I've taken it on board. I've taken it into organisations. Let's look at this problem from the perspective of time, a lifetime, and the lifetime of an organisation. I mean, many family businesses in the UK only last 40 years. But they behave like an extended family to their employees.
Yeah.
I mean, we know how dysfunctional families actually are, but they pretend that somehow being a family is a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's important. It creates loyalty and love and understanding and good communication and all those things that just simply aren't true at all. And I've found that people are still struggling with time perspective as a concept, as an idea, because the culture has, not clearly, but can point to the working hours and the law as a guide to how to cope with time. But they will pick apart somebody who's not being as productive as they should be, and they're the ones who get burnt out, because they're holding. I mean, we've got a collective group of people, let's call them a happy family, which is actually a group of individuals who are suffering, they're isolated, they're lonely, they're fearful, and the ones who haven't been intelligent enough to find a strategy of coping, which is, well, I'll just wait until I retire, which is what everybody does. I hear this still in the UK. I'm 5 years off retirement, Alan. I'm not going to implement a new idea now. But we want you to come and talk about the idea, and we want you to maybe do something with us, and we'll pay you very handsomely, but we're not going to implement it. I mean, they don't say that, but that is the outcome. That was brilliant. It's fantastic. I now have another way of talking about what I'm not doing. Brilliant. Thanks. Bye-bye. So, isn't it strange? So, I mean, at the beginning, you all three said, yes, it is possible for an organisation to have a good time culture. And I think that's a nice and reasonable and a balanced thing to say. And yet I'm not really hearing where the good examples are. But I'll come back to that, because
I think we touched a very important issue, that many of the problematic contemporary organizations don't have their past positive focus, the past positive element of their identity. I mean, past positive builds the identity of the organization. And it's completely neglected, I mean, in many organizations. Some of them do care, especially those with great history, proud history, and great founder. But I think there are in the minority, and most organizations are just completely future focused. They're not here and now. They have nothing to do with their past. Only the future goals and goals and goals. are crucial, are important, are the thing that motivates, and goals do motivate. It's obvious, but for what cost, and what are the side consequences of such policy? And again, we come back to balance. Again, we come back to balance. To provide the sense of identity, to provide the sense where we are coming from, what were the initial ideas, what we have already done, what we have already developed. And this is important both at the level of organization, but also at the level of particular employee, to see what I have done for the organization, my path of my career within this organization, how I have changed, what were the milestones in my way. And this is fundamental. This completely changes your way of looking at where you are working, what you are doing there. It gives you this sense of meaning. Meaning.
So we derive the meaning of the future from our past.
I think so.
But you see, one of the things in terms of the time culture in organizations is that more and more organizations are having people work for shorter and shorter amounts of time. And you're on contract, and maybe you don't know if it'll be renewed, and it'll be 1 year, as opposed to the idea that you get a job finally, and then you work until you retire, and you get the gold watch, and you know, whatever, and have a career, and have milestones, and whatever. But more and more, it's very short term. That doesn't mean people going in have any particular loyalty to it. I mean, the revolving door is fast, but they don't see it as a problem. So you have a shorter amount of time and many short things. It's so, how that's going to play out. I mean, you don't spend enough time in the organization after a year to, really develop that.
And even the qualification is much shorter now. You have to requalify after just a few years.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is it's breaking up a more continuous kind of pattern, or long term, into many short ones. And how that perhaps doesn't support the kind of positive past, the sense of connection, the rituals and all that kind of thing.
And continuity of it all.
Yeah, because it's always in and out, in and out. And there was another sort of part of that I was going to add to, and I know, and that is that what we're seeing a lot more these days is a value placed on being disruptive. This is great. We're going to disrupt this, disrupt that. And I'm seeing that sometimes disruption is not a good thing. It might be good in the sense of being creative or innovative, or get away from frameworks so that you can approach a problem differently. But there are things where they get disrupted, and it's actually breaking apart the kinds of things that you're talking about, because that's not allowed to continue, and particularly if you've got people sort of moving in and out. So the disruption, I don't think people always think about. They're thinking, this will be great because it'll be positive, it'll be good things, it'll be new industries or whatever. But I don't see as much people talking about the negative of disruption, in the sense that it comes with costs. It's like anything in life. There's a positive and a negative, a kind of double-edged sword here. And what are we paying, for this kind of thing? And I don't know any answer to that, but I just put it out there as something that also certainly has an impact on a sense of connection to past, a sense of history, a sense of growth and development, taking advantage of present ceremonies and rituals and whatever. I mean, if that gets disrupted as opposed to we celebrate some of those things, I don't know. It's just something to think about.
Well, I mean, it's all been interesting to think about, and I think it's great to be able to have this conversation with some people who are thinking about it and looking at it very seriously. So, and of course the audience also. So, well, can I actually thank you all then? Can I thank you, first of all, can I thank you for everything you did in the past? Can I thank you for what you're currently doing? And also, can I thank you for what you're going to do? Thanks very much.
Okay.